All right, perfect. Rocking and rolling like we just talked about. Here live with Garry Singer from Clear Golf. Gary, thanks for coming on. I know we were back and forth a little bit and rescheduled, but I'm very, very excited to talk all things golf balls tonight.
Great to be here.
You know, it seems like in your segment of the market that direct to consumer seems to be the way that the golf ball market is transitioning with the advent of some other of your competitors. I'm not going to mention them since they haven't come on and you're here. But is that where the industry's heading? Is that how you guys have modeled your product, or is there something else going on?
Well, it's a question I wish I had a better answer for, only because, we've kind of gone through a couple iterations from the time I started this, where we're a subscription model. I end up meeting, as I mentioned, a buddy and the former CEO of Patron Tequila, who had, I believe, the biggest single brand sale in the alcohol business. I got friendly with Ed, become a very close friend. He came on board, thankfully, right after he retired from Patron. And he started pushing it more towards green grass shops. But just we have since been majority ownership taken by Discovery Land, who has built multiple, billion-dollar brands. And so we're kind of following their lead. We'll be in their places. We're trying to get integrated with their iconic properties all over the world. It's the perfect clientele for us. It's like the most discerning, customer you can have. They want the absolute best. It's a perfect fit for us. So we're kind of getting through the process now, how we're going to, roll out with regards to Discovery and elsewhere.
I consider myself a pretty avid golfer. I've been in and around the industry since I started caddying at 11. So that was, when was that? 1983. And until, when Mark Lai was on the podcast and he brought up Clear Golf Balls, I had never heard of it. And I thought it was pretty up to speed on everything out there. So can you just give everybody a little history of the company and kind of the thought process behind it?
For sure. So I came up, grew up very blue collar. My dad was the chief of police in Westchester County, New York, and he, listen. I should thank my folks because I literally have had the greatest life because of my parents. But they put my brothers and I. My dad was a high school dropout, went back, got a master's degree and a law degree, and was a career policeman there, military, retired brigadier general. Forced my brothers and I to go through school. My folks pushed, so I got a law degree. I started a legal services business in New York, and I was lucky. We were married for 8 years with my wife, who's a tennis player, and after 8 years, we end up having, out of nowhere, we have 3 kids. We have the Irish triplets, 3 kids in 16 months. I had started this business in New York, and it was just like overwhelming. I'm traveling an hour and a half back and forth each way to the city. I got 3 kids, babies at home. So at 41, I'm thinking I sold my business. And I did nothing. I sat, was around with my kids while they grew up, which was like one of the few smart moves I've made. Just, kind of cut it down early. Knew at some point I'd probably end up having to go back to work. And I did about 10 years at home with my kids, kind of taking care of them, goofing off, playing sports every day. And then when I went back to work, instead of being a lawyer, I wanted to do something fun. And I ran into a guy. When I grew up, the iconic golf companies were McGregor. It's probably, I'm by the way, it kills me. You're like 10 years younger than me. Everyone seems to be younger than me these days. But when I grew up, the iconic golf companies were McGregor and Wilson and Spalding. I don't know if you remember these guys were dominating golf, all these great American companies, and now they're all gone. For the most part, they're still around, but they're not around like they used to be in the golf business anyway. So I ended up meeting someone from McGregor, and I wanted to golf balls when urethane came out. The balls had gone from like $12 a dozen to like 32, and I'm like, man, we got to do something cheaper. Golf balls, it's too expensive for people. And the guy from McGregor, who has since passed away, just a terrific guy, treated me like a son. Because wrong way to go. He goes, you don't want to do that. It's a race to the bottom. What you want to do is build the absolute best, and that way everyone's chasing you. And that's kind of was our goal. We started out that way to build it. I did it with a buddy of mine, another guy sadly passed away, Mitch Slater, who just was my closest friend. He was he might have been the biggest concert promoter in the United States. The company has since they merged and they rolled up and became Live Nation. But Mitch and I started this business and brought some different guys on, and now we have kind of different partners along the way, strategic partners and friends of mine from kind of very big in their industry. We brought on board, and like I was telling you kind of offline, we've built we've got this company where we're kind of poised now with Discovery to really start expanding.
When did the company get started?
We've been around. I would say it's a good question. Again, we've changed, like literally changed 180 degrees 3 time. So I always say, like, we're starting now, but with Ed, it's been 2 years, with him on board, maybe 3, and then probably, a few more years before that. So it's just different iterations of the same thing, and really, always focused on getting our products right. And we always think we have the absolute best. And like I was telling you before, our goal is to, when guys get on track, man, to get the best numbers from our ball. So that's been
and it's been showing that the testing and things that you've done.
We test constantly. We test to make sure we have the best product we can. And we've got a nice little, I would call it a cult following at this time. And as we roll it out with Discovery on board, I think more and more people that will have a lot more reach. They've built multiple big brands before, and I think they're going to do the same thing with Clear.
What would be some of the criteria that you guys have noticed through your quality control and the adherence to being top level and not cutting any corners and things like that? What are some of the numbers that are standing out where you're bettering the competition?
Well, we count on for quality control, it's all the things you would think of, just not just the physical appearance of the ball, but the concentricity, the core, all the things you would top players would notice. Really affect performance. But our big thing in testing is just like everybody else, trying to maximize distance, distance, spin, and dispersion numbers are like the big ones that we try to really focus on. One guy we brought on board, Charles Schwartzel, Masters champion. We bring Charles on, and he had been injured, and he sat down with Ed and I when he first came on. Again, it's probably 2 years ago, maybe 3. And the first time he sat down with it, he goes, I've been out. I've been hurt for 2 years. He goes, no one's tested more golf equipment than me, especially golf balls. When I'm trying to come back, he goes, and as far as I'm concerned, I remember like it was yesterday, he goes, as far as I'm concerned, Clear is the gold standard. He goes, your ball is flawless. And, it was kind of, this is our guy. We liked him, he's behind the product. We're a small company, so we weren't paying a lot of guys. We brought Charles on as our one endorser on tour, and he's been terrific for us. In the final group of the Masters, he won the first. He was the first champion of the Live Tour, won the first week, and he's been just a terrific ambassador for us.
Has it been hard to break in? Because of all the segments of the golf industry, the equipment side of the business, I would think that the golf ball segment has got to be fiercely competitive. Has it been hard to make forays into that field?
I think we're not big enough yet to have, run into the, those kind of, I think gaining market share, you watch the companies that are, battling out, the big companies that are battling out for market share. I think it's extremely competitive. I really don't look at like we have, it's, I mean, this probably sounds like the wrong thing to say or the wrong way to say it, but, our market is different. It's the guys who are at these iconic properties, they want these things that are the best. They don't mind if it costs, we're not really price sensitive. They want the the best thing they can get. So I kind of look like we don't have so much competition in that regard. We're not going after that market. That market it's almost impenetrable because you're in the same price points as everybody else, and it's hard to break in.
What was the thought process what drew you to the golf ball part of the industry? Did you have a connection there? Or was there someone that you knew? Or
it's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know how much time we have on each question. But
you can go as long as you tell as many stories as you want. People love to hear stories.
It's like there's not that. It's a small industry, right? So when we got asking, I got for a country law, I got a pretty good network of guys, and we've got a bunch of athletes and entertainers on board, guys very high level. But I'm trying to find someone who knows about this golf ball thing when I decided to do it, and it literally took me multiple years to find the right guy. And I ran into this guy from McGregor finally, who we had a great relationship, but it took forever. So when we decided we're going to do something in rackets, I'm out in Las Vegas with my wife, and I called one of my buddies, Jim Curry, a tennis player. And I said, hey, and I'm asking him, and I was asking a buddy, his partner, they own the Champions Tour in tennis, and they gave me the name of a guy. And I just called the guy up, and we're talking. I go, hey, I got your name. We do some of this. We want to try to maybe expand out in the rackets because we've got Yvonne Lendl uses our ball. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Lendl.
Oh, yeah. He was big when I was in middle school, high school.
Okay, so we've got multiple guys who were former number one tennis players in the world. And, so we got very good tennis connections. So I wanted to try to do something in the rackets line, and I call this guy after 2 years of looking for a golf guy. I call this guy. I'm at the Bellagio, And he goes, hey, this is a great idea. We're going to do it. He goes, I'm just on vacation right now. Can I call you Monday? And I go, yeah, I'm on vacation too. He was literally across the street from me in Las Vegas at the coffee shop at the Bellagio. And then our new, Mike Melman is very big into this pickleball sport. So we've got some products now in pickleball around the world. I don't know if you've heard of the sport called padel, which outside the U.S. is growing like pickleball here. And we have just some incredible technology in both of those sports. And like golf, we want to produce the absolute best in the world with no regards for, we've no limitations on what we're going to do. If it's better, we're going to do it. And that was kind of our goal, and that's our goal in golf. Whatever we do, we have some shaft technology. I don't know if you have one of our shafts. I know Mark does.
No, I don't.
We have some. Everything we do, again, same thing. That's why I was saying that we kind of don't feel like we're trying to compete in a market. Long way of going about saying. I don't feel like we're trying to compete in that market. That is hard. I'm sure is incredibly hard to break into and take market share. We feel like ours is a different market. Ours is for the guys. They want the best, absolute best. Mm-hmm. It's a completely different market, I think.
I remember, as we talked about earlier, that some of the big companies, the McGregors, the Spaldings, Wilson, many years ago or decades ago now, those are the premier companies. And then Wilson kind of separated themselves from that pack. If you go back, I think probably the late 80s into the 90s. And then all of a sudden, Wilson made this pivot that they wanted to become the premier tennis equipment company. And they did, but they did. The cost of that, in my opinion, at least for the golf industry, was that they lost that premier or that segment of the golf industry that looked to them as one of the leaders. Titleist was coming on back then, and they were kind of jockeying for position. And I would have to say that Titleist has overtaken them now. Do you see the diversification of the golf and the tennis is? If it grows to a certain level, how do you manage that? Being that it's somewhat two different divisions.
Completely separate, right? Completely, guys. It's a completely different skill set for the guys who are involved in it. Right? The golfers don't know tennis. The tennis guys don't know golf. And again, we run them for the products, not for the business. I mean, you watch the consolidation in the golf business. I mean, these companies, the big companies now, for the most part, I think are owned by private equity firms. We own our own company here. So I think, we bring on clientele that are specific to, if I can get McEnroe involved, if I can get, Lendl involved. These guys have, just a huge amount of knowledge of what they want to do, where they think it's going. They're great, great sources of information, but they're completely separate from golf. Those are the things, when I got a golf question, I go to Charles Schwartzel. I don't go to Yvonne Lendl.
But I guess what I'm asking, as far as running businesses, it's almost like two different segments of the same company. And can it be somewhat stifling to your growth as you're trying to grow a golf ball company and you're trying to grow a tennis company simultaneously? Does it divert your attention or water it down to some degree?
No, I don't think so. Again, only because I think we've got resources, like big. It's not like we're allocating resources. This guy's going to try to run golf and tennis. They're completely separate. And I think your point to Wilson, I think they might have pivoted, and I don't know this for sure. Although I was a Wilson staff guy up to 2 years ago, I was using my Wilson staff blades, which I probably shouldn't have been using. Great club. They made such great clubs, and I think maybe they did. They've, I don't know if they, I don't know if it was a conscious decision, maybe not to have as much presence on tour. You remember, like back to Sam Snead days, all those old red and white Wilson bedwear seemed everywhere.
Yes.
And I don't know if they just kind of toned that down, or just you never know. It could have been an economic downturn that runs people kind of away from you. You just don't know. I mean, they've been around a long time. They've been through ups and downs, I'm sure.
Where is your company based out of?
Delray Beach, Florida.
Oh, nice. And now where it's warm, you got out of New York. I was hoping you weren't going to say you're still in New York.
COO was here. We have our company here. Thank goodness I got him. Scott Stetner runs our operation. This guy doesn't miss a trick. Thank goodness.
Do you have an R&D team, or was Charles very influential in providing feedback?
We have a tremendous amount of R&D. One thing I think guys worry about, we're small, but we're not short of R&D at all. And the nice thing is, with the team we have, we'll do some work for other companies as well. They know if they're on to something, they say, listen, this might do something, it's going to be expensive, or it's, no one else is going to pay for this. We will. If it has some value, we're interested in it.
I many years ago, I worked with a guy, Mike Obarski. He knew more about golf clubs and fitting by far than anybody I'd ever run across. And I came across some very, very smart people in that industry. And Mike's pretty much retired now. With the downturn in the economy and shaft manufacturers, he was having a very difficult time because he was an independent, even though he'd been in business for 35 plus years, getting shafts. And he basically could. He's 71 or 2 now, and he's like, okay, I might just shut this down. He'll still do fittings for, if I've known him for 15, 20 years now, I think. So if I have students that I say, hey, this person really needs to get fit because their stuff is so off, he'll let me, he'll still do the work for that. But the point was, I learned from him many, many years ago, because he'd been around since the late 70s. He started, and then he became an independent on the PGA Tour. But he would tell me that the quality control for golf club heads, that and this is going back again 15, 20 years, if many manufacturers would have spent up to 5 cents more per head, that their quality control level would have skyrocketed. But not many of them wanted to do it. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, because I could tell you, and we can talk about this later when we get off, company to company to company, that the weights of their heads are completely, not even close, like a 3-wood head coming in at 203 grams when they should be, 213 minimum, preferably 215 or 16. And it's just like, when we would build these clubs and just take them apart and weigh them and do everything else, it's like, my God, are they bad? It's like really 5 cents more a head. Not some people come back and say, you got to remember, they're doing hundreds of thousands of heads a year. I'm like, that's even more of a reason to spend the money. If your overhead's 5 cents and you're trying to do a 5 times profit on it, so you're charging 25 cents more a club. If someone's paying $700 for a set of clubs, I don't think 25 cents more per club is going to really slow down any sales. So,
by the way, I think you look at that though. I think those kind of things have matured over time. They've developed over time, right? You can't listen, graphite. Even in your, I'm old again. I'm older than you. In our lifetime, graphite comes out, and our guys have been in this business forever. In both the tennis and golf, our composite engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And before this, you didn't have high modulus graphite. I don't know. You remember the old golf shafts? I don't know. These things, you couldn't control them. The graphite wasn't made that way. It wasn't set up properly to withstand the torque and the flex. And I don't think you could quality control them, even if you wanted to. The heads, I don't know. Maybe there was different ways of measuring things. Now, guys are going to measure things. People want these things that are super precise. I'll give you a perfect example of like the technology we use, our shaft technology. So you're familiar with like spining shafts or puring shafts.
Mm-hmm.
We take a shaft, and we literally have the best shaft. He's in the I'm sure you might know the guy, Mark Timms.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, very smart shaft guy. I personally think he's the best there is. Getting some good education from him. And we'll take a shaft. You take one of our shafts, and shafts are adjustable. Clubs are adjustable now, right? I want to try taking a degree off. I want to put a degree on. Whatever you want to do with it, right? You take the shaft and pure it, all of a sudden you turn in your club. That shaft's not pured anymore. Our shafts will be such that when you turn these things, it won't affect it 1/10 of one flex, because it'll be perfect all the way around. So adjusting that's not the end of your period. The shaft goes in. Anything you want to do to try on your club will not affect that by less than 1/10 of one flex. And
that's pretty impressive as technology has come that far. To go back to your point about graphite, I remember what was the graphite shaft industry was more or less that came from the fly rods. What was the name? There was a fly rod company, and then they had a golf shaft segment to their business.
The original golf, some of the original golf graphite tennis rackets, were Aldila.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But
Louise Clerc would try these things out, and the graphite was so not up to wasn't developed yet, and they're like handing it back. It's funny how these engineers know where it's headed. They know where things are going. I don't know if you're a tennis guy at all.
No, my girlfriend's a tennis fanatic. I think she's a 4.0. She got to a 4.5, but she's too much for her.
Rackets came out, and they were very thick, called wide body rackets, and that was in a way to stiffen the frame instead of getting all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Did this thing saying, Greg Norman, a graphite golf shaft, trying them out from our guys. He hands it back to him and says, no one's ever going to use a graphite. That's for amateurs. No pro will ever use one. Now there's no such thing but graphite. No one's using a steel shaft anymore. Same thing with rackets. We had a guy, top player of the world, hand it back, say, no one's ever going to use a graphite tennis racket. There's nothing but, these composite rackets now. So the engineers know where it's going, but it takes some time for the materials to develop and catch up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Things we develop now, we kind of going forward. We're working on some, some tennis things and some, padel and pickleball, kind of knowing where it's going. But sometimes if you're too early to the party, guys won't adopt it. Especially like, you're a very good player. I always use the example. If you went up to Jack Nicklaus, who was using this like little tiny wood head on a steel shaft, a 460, looks like an oil can on the end of a 65 gram or 60 gram graphite shaft. If you handed that to Jack Nicklaus, he'd hand that back to you so fast, saying, "This is a toy. This is not a real golf club," right? And it was better for him then, and it's better for him now. But it was just, you couldn't have got away with it back. If you handed that to those guys back then, nobody would have used it.
Mm-mm. It was. I used to watch a lot of TED Talks when I had a lot more time, free time, and one of the ones I found most fascinating was the guy that did a study on. He had a list. One side, he had two lists. I'm sorry. One side was companies you never heard of, and the other side was Apple and Google and the whole Yahoo at the time, and just a litany of all the companies that are worth billions of dollars now. And he said, "Look, I analyze these things for a living, and all these companies on this side that you've never heard of, by every accountable measure, they were equally as good as all these that you know by first name today. But the difference was." The timing in the market for them was not right, because either their technology was so advanced that no one could understand it, and then they quickly said, as you just alluded to, this will never work. There's no way. And it's why he said a lot of these companies fell on their face. I mean, they had plenty of funding. They had the technology was, as I just mentioned, extremely advanced, but so much so that it was too far out there. And Apple, of course, being the model for so many years, was Apple just came along. They had the technology, they had everything, but the timing in the market was right, that it was primed for something like them to come into that. And of course, they did what they did, and the rest is history. But yes, it as you mentioned that, and I will say that probably the video on YouTube that I get the most kickback on is the spining of shafts, and the fact that I've been waiting for the day for somebody to say that they can eliminate the ability or the need for somebody to spine it, because my argument was, if you spine it at either 3 or 9 o'clock, you're going to lose stability in vertical control of the golf ball. So bringing the flight up or down. If you spine it at 6 or 12, you're going to lose directional control, because right. There's an unstable part of the golf shaft in one section. So you're going to lose whatever. If you gain, you're going to lose in another area. And that's awesome that you guys have come up with it to where it's such a small measurement of the quality control has gotten to such a level that the measurement is so small, it's almost not even an issue.
No, and again, that's benefit. I don't think it could have been done. It 100% couldn't have been done years back, right? The materials are getting better now, and then if you're quality control and you take the big metrics down that matter on the shaft of straightness and the things that matter, and the material controls, you get these things down and you narrow it down, and it'll get better and better and better. But I think our shafts that come out, we're not a shaft. It's something we will offer. There's a need for it. Our clients, they want some of the best things. And the shaft thing's tricky because it's still, no matter what anyone says, it's still trial and error, right? You got to get, dynamic variables, kick point and how you swing, you smash, angle of attack and things like that. But you want the quality of the shaft to be perfect. So if you hit the demo and like it, you can go order a new shaft, and not how many guys who say, "I'm keeping the demo."
That was always one of the big issues when as I was learning that side of the business, that when somebody would come in, and because we would frequency everything, we'd profile everything, every shaft in the trailer was frequencied before it was ever cut. So we knew that what the raw frequencies were. And then I didn't do it. The magic of Mike's expertise was where to cut it to maintain balance, yet still fit the load profile of an individual golfer. But some guys would come in and they would say, well, it was easier with steel to identify, and it would blow them away that we could tell them how they were going to hit or what clubs they hit well and what clubs they didn't, based off the fitting and the computer computations. But when it came to the graphite, and things were all over the map, they said, I hit this well, but I'm so afraid to switch because it's so hard to match it. And I said, yeah, well, here's the manufacturing process between a table rolled or a filament wound, and then here's the playability difference between the two, and then you adjust in the steel.
Right.
I mean, that arena is, you could go down a deep rabbit hole, and if you don't have some idea of what you're doing, they're going to stick you in a padded room with a jacket that ties behind your back.
No doubt. No doubt.
The shafts, are they in the process of you're coming out with them, or you already have
process right now working? It's we want to it's not a fast process because you do things. Hey, this worked, this didn't work, and we want these things to be perfect. And it's not like, hey, let's this didn't do, let's try this, and then tomorrow you got another one out. It's back to the prototyping, table sample. It's work, but we're getting there. We've got some samples in that were just so good. Even our guys were like always skeptical. We're like very fired up about it, which tells me we're darn close to having that going.
And is that in steel and in graphite, or just one of the other?
Just in graphite. I don't know. One of my partners is an investment banker. He knows a lot about it. He was involved in some sales of some shaft companies and was telling me about the steel shaft business because I always kind of inquire about it. He's a very knowledgeable guy. And I want to learn more. That steel shaft business, I don't know if you know about it. It is a tedious and very intensive process to make a steel golf shaft. It's incredible. I knew nothing about it.
I know enough to be dangerous. I don't know enough to speak as intelligently as some troll out there that's going to listen to this and they're going to comment on everything. You wrong on this, this, or this. So maybe we will leave the extent of the dynamics of the shaft building industry to the guys that know that the best. Your graphite, they're the traditional rolled graphite, or is it a different type of composite?
So by the way, we looked at, do you remember what was the company that they built great, all these shafts are good. They built these incredibly good shafts and they end up with some breakage on tour.
That John Sinclair is really involved with them. Is it TRT or
TPT?
TPT, that's it.
Yeah.
Jason Days broke up. They had an issue where they were breaking about 2 inches down from the butt end.
Correct.
And John said they got that sorted out.
Yeah. So I leave that up to our guys how we're going to ultimately. As long as listen again, it's all about the quality control for these things to have these things work. Where the profiles and you'll see. I don't know. Are you familiar with the S3 machine?
No.
S3 is, I think, and again, by the way, you get some guys coming in with this knucklehead doesn't know what he's talking about, which you're probably right. But the S3 is, I think, the machine that is like the gold standard for measuring shafts. They have a database for every shaft. That's Tim. I think Tim's might have developed it.
Is that the one that measures all the different segments of the shaft? And
you get a thing. It looks like you just got audited. This incredible amount of data, and and I go through it with these guys who know what they're doing. Know what they're talking about. The EI profiles and how they're adjusted all over the place for depending on the shaft is held or hit. And so all those things as far as manufacturing goes, I leave it up. These guys tell me, hey, we can do it better this way. I'll go with it. So that out of my again, it's not even out of my decision. Whatever's best, we're going to do. The TPT, I think those TPT ones were the only ones that were completely robotically built.
It might have been. I know because I follow John. I met him at Coach Camp, at Andrew Rice's Coach Camp here in Bluffton and Hilton Head, and why he had lunch with me when I was a nobody my first year at the camp, and here you have Sinclair, who's top 50 or top whatever top. He's very well known and respected, and we got to talk about it. It was very interesting to hear about those shafts. I don't know the details about it, but I do know that they are very highly regarded and being played by a number of guys.
I think they made some. They still may be around doing it, but they were getting huge reviews. People, at high levels, really like their shaft. They made some good products. They'll do it.
I think today's world in any industry and society in general, that everything has gotten so the lack of trust has become so rampant because everything has been so polarized. Yeah, and you can pick politics, you can pick news, you can pick anything you want to. That companies in general will try to, through marketing, try to portray an image, and then people will try to buy the image. And I think society in general is lacking. Or not lacking, but very hungry for just do what you're supposed to do. Be honest with us. Develop a trust factor with a company or a brand. And it seems to be the way that things, it's allowed me to do a podcast. How many 10 years ago, would anybody in the golf industry listen to anything outside of the Golf Channel or maybe ESPN to get their golf news or information? And now look how many podcasts there are. So I think who am I to tell you? You're obviously running a very successful company. But I think what you guys are doing is definitely on the right track. That your mantra is the decision's already made. If it doesn't have the utmost and highest quality standards that we adhere by, we're not doing it. So the guiding principle is there.
Right, and as I was telling you before, the thing I like about this, man, I'm not a sales guy. I don't want to sell it. I don't want to talk anyone into buying something. I want guys to take our equipment out, and if it's the absolute best thing for them, which I think it will be, they're going to love it. And if they don't, then it's not for them. But I don't want to be. No one wants to feel like they're talking someone into it. It's not a sales business we're in. We're in the business of building, high precision sports equipment, and if it works for you, terrific. And I think it will. And again, it's a segment of the population. I don't want to be worrying about. Listen, when you were playing golf, you want to be worrying about, is my golf ball, concentric in the middle? Is it golf balls didn't used to be, right? A lot of balls. How many times? I think Jack Nicklaus was saying how many balls out of a dozen were kind of flying, but that was just the technology at the time. And
remember they had there was the old ball. It was a metal circle, and then it had the circle in the middle that the pros would have to put their golf balls through to make sure they were perfectly round or as round as possible.
Listen, you could hit a lot of ball out of round. I'm sure you did it many occasions, right? The ball would go out. Things don't happen like that anymore. But you want the things to be perfect. And there's a second. I think even at my level, you don't want to be worried about, is my shaft okay? Is it sitting in the club okay? Right? Has it been oriented there? It's going to be perfect. Where I want this thing when I'm using a racket. I know my technology. I want this thing to be perfect. I don't want to be thinking about equipment. I want to be worried about playing. And that's that's our goal, is take the equipment factor out of the equation.
I don't want to get off on outside of golf too much, but I got to ask you, because we were talking about tennis. I told you my girlfriend was a good tennis player. When it gets to the composites of a tennis racket, how do you guys manufacture those to accommodate the variance in flex of the strings that are put on there? So, for example, do you have different levels of rackets based off the tightness of the strings that are going to be put on?
So, in rackets, tennis technology, probably the biggest after the wide body, the biggest change in the tennis industry has been these polyester strings, called poly strings, rather than these multi-filament strings. And at the tour level, it makes a massive difference. These guys can control the ball, make the ball dip. John, it makes it very hard for guys like him. He was, I don't know how much again about tennis, but
he was back in the wooden racket era.
But even his composite, he used a 200G and some other, but he was what's called a serve and volley. He would serve and rush the net all the time. So it was kind of intriguing to watch. I love watching him play. It's a beautiful game, kind of coming in and trying to charge the net. Now everyone kind of stays back. It's a very homogenized game for the most part. The poly strings, these guys can make the ball dip so hard, it's hard to approach the net because they roll the balls and you're digging them off your shoe tops. So it makes it very difficult for guys to come in, and that's the string technology that made a big difference in the tennis industry. Our rackets use a technology called dual resonance technology. So it's basically like you're familiar with like noise canceling in headphones. Ours are vibration canceling. Inside our racket, there's a beam of wood you can't see, and the sides of the frames move independently, and it kills the vibration in the racket. It looks different. It's a big fan-shaped racket. So again, I always feel like I tell our guys, we're ahead of our time. Guys are like, I can't use this, and it's incredible technology.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm trying to, but I even would argue with McEnroe. It's like, what, we got to do something more for traditional. So I think we'll develop a racket that's a little more traditional looking for the tour guys. But we're going to keep our frames because the technology, like I said, like a 460cc titanium driver head, which is a little bit ahead of our time on the racket front.
In trying to do some homework on y'all's company, as we've been back and forth getting scheduling and everything else, it wasn't easy to do. But one of our mutual friends told me some interesting things, and that you used to, it was either play golf or Sean Connery. You used to either play with him or he used to play your ball.
Sean's a clear partner. Sadly, he's passed away. His sons are still our partners, and our sons are exactly my age. Very close buddies of mine. The greatest family. The mother. You could not find I can't speak more highly. And Sean treated me like a son. From the time I met him, he used our golf ball. I was in Las Vegas. His son, Stefan, who was a very successful art dealer, had him Sean using our golf ball. And I get a call again. I was away with my wife. Phone rings, and it's Sean Connery. And I knew he used our ball. And he goes, Gary, would you consider playing my member guest with me? I'm like,
wow.
Like, is that a trick question?
Yeah, let me think about that and get back to you. Okay.
I tell you, though, it's funny, though. I always tell the story. My partners will be throwing up when they hear me tell the story again. But I find out the member guest where they play is like, in most 3-day member guests are now 2 days. Theirs is a week. Theirs is a week long. A week.
Was that in the Bahamas?
Yeah. And I'm about to go down, and I tell my wife, I go, it's just, Sean and the wife in the house, the brother that lived down the street. I go, they're going to be sick of me in 24 hours, forget a week. And from the time I got there, and she goes, well, you got to go. There's no getting out of it. From the time I got there, he literally treated me like a son. He couldn't be. And when I got on board Clear, they basically, him and his son Stefan, hey, we're coming on board Clear with you. So Sean was a Clear partner. Very lucky to have him. Lucky to have Stefan and Jason as well on board with us. Those are the sons, and the mothers. Always they could not speak. You talk about for a guy who's as world famous as you can be, just so down to earth, and could not have treated me any kinder. Was very happy. Sadly, passed away during COVID. But not of COVID, but during that era, so we couldn't do it. We just did a service for him now.
That's very cool that somebody at his level, with his notoriety and fame, remained grounded, that he never forgot who he was, where he came from. Being a good person preceded any ego that he might have had. Anyone that I've talked to that knew him, or maybe not a degree or two away from him, has always said the same thing. Well,
I tell you what, you would have really liked him. Nobody liked their golf more. He was out there every day.
It would be very cool if you guys ever did a commercial that you could somehow license the rights to Goldfinger, and when he pulls the ball out of his pocket or the hole, it could be a clear golf ball. That would be awesome.
Sadly, by the way, you're ahead of your time there, because I'll tell you my corny version of my commercial I wanted to do, and we never ended up doing it. He kind of got a little too old, and but he was going to hit a ball and be disgusted, and then we were going to throw him a clear ball, and he was going to hit it, and we would have said, if you had clear, you would have beat Goldfinger on 50. And we never got to do it, but he would have done it in a minute. We just never got, kind of put it off, and then it's like everything else in life, you put it off too much, and you never get to do it.
I went through that back when Harvey Pennick's The Little Red Book came out. I was here in Hilton Head, and I wanted to, and this is going back, 30 years ago, to where there wasn't there wasn't technology, but there wasn't, obviously social media. Email was just kind of getting popular, but I wanted to travel to Austin to just to go watch him teach, because obviously he was in his 90s, and I said, this guy's a legend. How often are you going to get to go see somebody teach? And that, as far as I know, that wasn't very prominent. You might have gone to see somebody in your region. I know a fair number of people in our area used to go see Jack Lumpkin down at Sea Island, right, and just watch him teach. Mike Adams was always, I think, going back into Florida. He was in Florida in the winter. So, some of the bigger names, obviously Butch. But I thought it would have been very cool to go see Harvey, and I didn't do it because I'm 20-some years old, early 20s. I'm like, he wouldn't want to let some no-name punk kid let him come watch him teach. And I regret that, and have every day since.
Can I tell you, you learn our lessons, right? If you could go back, you would have done it. If it doesn't turn out well, so what? At least you gave it a shot.
And what made me feel worse, and he didn't try to make me feel bad, but I had Brian Gathright on the show, and Brian ran the first Harvey Pennick Golf School. He worked under Mr. Pennick for many years, and then was asked to run his golf schools. And when I told him that story, he said, "Oh, you should have went." He said he would have loved to have you come out there, a young kid like that wanting to learn. I'm like, oh man, just rub salt in that old wound.
I'm sure what, and that's why you got to do it, right? You got to find out.
What the long-term version for the golf ball division, what would that entail?
So, again, as we integrate, as Discovery takes us out, there, again, they just so many iconic properties around the world. I think their membership is going to get behind. They should, because we're going to cater to what they want. And my hope is that they adopt us as their brand, and we grow from there. And I think they had, that group owned Casamigos Tequila as well, my partners, and kind of the same thing. And they keep, I think the members feel like that's, they're part of that brand, and I'm hoping they do the same with Clear.
What so you have, because I played friend of mine, one of my students got some of the balls, and it was the softer of the two. You have the two versions, the harder version.
Our tour green. Again, when you say softer, it's really, which kind of something I found out along the way. It's really more of a sound than a deal. If you have headphones, you got your headphones on, you won't tell the difference between the balls. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. So is it geared towards the better player, the low handicap, or is it something that anybody like a beginning golf or an 18 handicap would find very valuable?
I think our we would call our firmer ball. When we were growing up, again, I'm equating you to my age, by the way. You don't get insulted by that, even though I am a generation older than you. But when we were coming up, these balls that sounded clicky would not spin. I don't know if you remember when I was a kid. I told you, I was a blue collar kid growing up. I found Molitor. It was like winning the lottery. It's like that ball was in the back of the magazines. It was like twice as expensive.
Yep.
And it was distance balls, top flight. Before Pinnacle's got some softer balls now that sound a little different. But at the time, all these distance balls. At the time, top flight was I loved them because I needed distance as a kid.
The XL, I used to love those things because they go forever.
But for the most part, those distance balls you couldn't use them around the greens. They just run right across the green. The technology is different now. Our Tour Black, is a little clickier than the Tour Green that Charles uses. But we have multiple guys on tour using our ball. The only guy who's a partner is Clear, but we get calls all the time. We have balls out there at a fair amount of time on tour, and I would say an equal amount using Tour Black. Guys who've gotten, the younger guys especially, they don't mind the clickiness because they see it's still spinning around the greens like mad. They're not really losing anything. It sounds clickier, and I think the older guys, equate that this thing's not going to spin because, like for my age, the clicky balls didn't spin. Not the case anymore.
And when, let's say that there's a kid, male or female, that they're either really good college player and they're looking to go pro, or they're Corn Ferry, or what is the ladies, Symmetra, or they're even on the tour.
Epson Tour now, yeah. We sponsor the Epson. Yeah. Or if you go out if you play a pro-am, they'll clear on the range at the Epson events.
So do they? How would that process go? If one of them, their agent, or they call you up and say, "Hey, okay, come on down to Delray Beach, and we'll take you through some testing."
No, we send them balls. We send them balls for the tour players. We have other balls for guys who are trying to do some lower spin balls and things like that. But most of the part, our two balls will cover kind of almost everyone, even on tour. You get some outliers who want a ball that's a much flatter. You see some of the balls that most of the ball companies have balls that are not the ones they sell to the general public. We have a couple of balls that guys can try, but right now, every guy on tour is using the ball we sell. When you get a ball, clear ball, those are the balls. Charles, Tour Green is the ball he uses. We've got other guys I can't mention because we don't pay them. But when you buy our Tour Black, that's the ball they're using. So,
and so the ones when, and you don't have to mention them. We got not to get into the Live PGA Tour dynamic and what's going on there, but
I got a lot of knowledge on that subject.
Mark and I we've had 2 shows on that. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to those when I sent them, but
involved in that a little bit,
the players. So you have a couple or a number of players on the various tours that are playing, and obviously they're not advertising because I'm sure they would want compensation to do that. Right. But can you speak to, is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 20?
It varies. Like we'll get calls. Hey, I tried the ball. I love it. Guys will love our ball. TrackMan's our best friend. They take our ball out there. They're going to get numbers they love. And balls, they want to try the ball. Again, kind of at it. We're going to follow the Discovery lead. We go forward with guys now as far as do we bring more guys on? Again, I can't mention names, but some very, very highly ranked players, trying our ball out and wanting to come on board. But it just, can you work a deal out? Is it, do we have, do they want to use the ball? If they do, can we work a deal out? It's the one thing Ed Brown kind of, I was always laughing at. Ed's done some that's my chairman of Patron, built a $5 billion tequila company. And the one thing I remember laughing at is he could not believe how difficult it was to get a deal done with these guys. When we first, and we ended up with Charles, which was great, but we on board, loved the ball, wanted to come on board. He goes, I remember him telling me, he's like exasperated. He goes, I cannot believe how hard this is. It's, there's a lot of variables that go into it.
Well, I think part of it is they're coming, or their perspective is what they're used to, and trying to do something that, let's say, is more beneficial, more efficient, better run. The product is, as you mentioned, it's better. So, but what their perspective and their perception of where they're coming from to the new deal, or to try to work with them and get them as an ambassador, it would probably be, in my opinion, more of the challenge, because maybe they were catered to, or they were, whatever the reason, fill in the blank. But in trying to change the perspective of somebody who's been treated a certain way for so long, not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it seems to me like that would be the more difficult part of the fight for you, or the transition.
Again, we have these guys know when they get on board and they realize who our partners are, the partners in our company are. We've got really high level guys on board our company from business that they dealt with, or some of the actors, entertainment. They want to be on board with our company. I think a lot of it. I don't get myself in hot water here, but whatever. The problem a lot of times the agent. It's difficult to do. Mm-hmm. They have sometimes interests aren't aligned. You have that, it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, that's just another spoke in the wheel that you have to deal with.
And if guys are coming on board, you want to get a guy and say, listen, you're glad to come on. We'll work something out. Do you want to do, depending on how the deal is structured. If it's just paying someone, it's one thing. If it's guys, hey, I want to get involved with the company, I want to get some equity, and the agent's not going to get a part of that. And it's interest sometimes become not aligned, and you got issues. And to tell you the truth, we haven't really gone after it. If it fell into our lap, great. A couple if we had some really high names that we loved, we kind of got excited about it a few times, but then kind of things just didn't work out. But for the most part, the only thing I really feel like, no one's going to go buy a ball, and I can't mention a name, but your level. You see, this guy's using a ball, I better use that. You're not going to do it because of that. You're going to play a ball if you like it. You have a measuring device. You're going to check. You're going to go out and hit on a TrackMan or any kind of launch monitor. Get your quad out, get whatever you got. You're going to go measure it. If the ball's better, if it feels better, if it's reacting around the green, that's where you're going to go. You're not going to go because some guy on tour is using the ball. If there was, everyone follows one guy on the tour, they'd all be using the same ball.
Right.
And it just doesn't work that way. So, with Charles, we needed the validation that we build a world-class golf ball. And with him being out there, and he's done, only having one guy, you watch some of these things, and every player is sponsored by the same, you get a lot of guys, sponsored by 2 different companies or 3 companies. We've got one guy out there that we can kind of advertise, and we can kind of, make posts about, and he's done pretty well for us. He's kind of, he's had had some good finishes. He's in the final group of the Masters. He was doing great.
Well, when he was in that final group, was he playing the clear ball then?
Yeah. You get on YouTube, and we didn't get a good trickle over the edge like that, Leon Tiger. But he made, this year was pretty cool. He made a 2 on the 10th hole at Augusta, which, as you know, is just a brutal hole. Mm-hmm. Kind of toppled in. It was nice, So, he's been terrific for us, and we haven't looked to sign it. We needed the validation of having a guy on tour, and we have it with him. So we really have not pursued anyone else in a big way.
If we can, talk about a little bit about the technology of the ball, so the difference in the urethane that you use, or the difference in the dimple size or the dimple depth, the radius of dimples and things like that. I don't know how much that we can talk about without you.
Like saying, that's why I kind of don't like talking about the technology, because I think that kind of even the guys at tour level, I really see in the tennis rackets, which kind of not the best. Guys, I like this racket. And the guys were Von Leno was number 1 in the world for I think 8 years, and yet the racket, he just knows what he likes. And I kind of like having people not telling him, well, this, and not to be evasive on the answer, but really what I like to have people do is just go out and hit the ball, get the ball, go out in your TrackMan versus whatever else you're using now. Try it out, try the field. The one thing I tell you, which was kind of interesting to me, I'm sure you've seen this a million times, but the testing of balls by tour players, how they go out, is like so vastly different. Some of these guys won't even hit a driver. They have a thing called there's actually a lab test now called the half wedge test. And that's all these guys want to do. They hit the 60-yard shot and see how it reacts. And then you get other guys who they want the ball going. I had one top of the world guy tell me, if it goes further, I want it. I'm like, you need distance. I need a hole in the head. He goes, if it goes further, I want it. These guys are still in a mad dash for distance, even at that level. So the testing of balls for me, that's why I don't, you can try this. We're going to use a different urethane. We're going to do, we tell them take it out and hit it. It's like a golf shaft. You can tell the guy this shaft until you take that out there and try it. There's no telling. But I think when they take our ball out and measure it, they're going to be, there'll be no going back.
Yeah, I mean, before we had the technology, when I was playing full time, and I think I mentioned that a buddy of mine had his tour card, and I had not gotten to there. And when he did, because he was in what's now the Corn Ferry, I think back then it was nationwide. He missed the top 10. They were only taking that year. He missed it by $1,100 one year, and then the next year he did get it. But in the off season, when there wasn't all there was before the wraparound and all that stuff. The equipment companies used to send him things because they're wooing him because I think he was number one all around in the nationwide back then. So he's obviously very highly sought after, and it was great for me because I go over his house and he's like, "Hey, come on, let's go out. We're going to test these golf balls that so-and-so sent. We're going to hit these drivers." Anything that he didn't like, he just gave it to me, which was great. It's like having a big brother. But back then what I was getting at was, our testing, what, if you could call it that, of golf balls was obviously we'd putt around the green for a while, see how it was with that, and especially the chipping, and then we had a wedge game where we'd practice. But then we would not make a decision, either of us, on a golf ball until we went out and hit it. Want to see it in crosswind, want to see it downwind, into the wind, knockdown shots, cut shots, draw shots, holding the wind, not, what was the ball flight, did it balloon, the whole litany of things. And if it didn't seem to match all those things that sought or matched our feel and our eye and those things, and it wasn't, that we didn't use it. I guess I can see where guys nowadays will go through a wedge session and hit it because drivers now are so adjustable that if they find a ball they like with their wedge, that they can get the driver modified and the shaft modified to get the conditions that they want to. So maybe today it's so much more advanced, of course, and that they have that ability to do so. But
well, the one thing I do get from guys, and which is incredible. I actually had a guy tell our ball. I don't know if you've heard this. I'm sure Mark's probably told you because he was one of the guys at his level. He can feel. We have everyone to how stable our ball is in the wind. Just
that was what I noticed, and I only played it for 9 holes.
And it was kind of an unintended consequence, which I should never divulge. It was just the way what keeps our ball stable from the inside. It seems to make this ball incredibly stable. I had one tour player go, "You sure it's legal? I'm here hitting balls, and the wind's not touching it." Charles told us he had to readjust his clubs he was hitting into the ball was penetrating. It's been really hear that from a lot of very top players.
I can remember in 2001 at Q School, we were at Bear Lakes in West Palm, and obviously down in South Florida the wind gets humming pretty good, especially the finals used to always be the first week of December, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas when everybody wanted to shut it down. And the Titleist had come out with they obviously had the Pro V leading up into that, but they had the what was it, the dot and the star, I believe it was back then. And just seeing that ball in a 25-mile-an-hour crosswind and hardly moving at all, to us was like, we're just sitting there like, this can't be legal.
Right.
It's almost like cheating. And to have a ball, because on driver, I could never get my spin low enough off the driver. I was always about level to maybe one up, one down on the path. And irons, I was always high launch, low spin. So it was a reverse dynamic of what everyone says you're supposed to be. So, I've got to get some of your balls and hit them again, because the 9 holes I played, I'm like, I could tell maybe I still have some good feel left over from the days that I was playing every day. And I did it for long enough, 15 years, 10 years. But I noticed a difference without a doubt.
Interview for your second. You Champions Tour is coming up for you then a couple more years.
I don't, everyone has been asking me that. I finally have got back to playing. I've hardly played in 10. I almost didn't touch a club for 2.5 years because of some back issues, and that seems to have been fixed. At least I'm playing a couple days a week now. But I don't know. I kind of like sleeping in my own bed and not having the stress of like nowadays, if I'm playing with the guys, whether we're playing 9 in the evening, well, not this time of year, but in the summertime. And if there's a 2.5, 3 footer and I don't feel like going through the grind, okay, that's good. I don't need to grind over that and say, God, if I got to make this and 2 more birdies or I'm going to miss the cut. No, I had enough of that.
It's no, man, there's no doubt about that. It's a high stress lifestyle for sure.
It's as Sean Foley and I were talking this morning. As far as coaching at the tour level, you have to have a very unique individual to do that, and to want to go through that grind as a professional, especially nowadays. I mean, I got done. My playing career more or less ended in 2006, 2007, and it's only gotten more competitive since. I mean, to make a cut in a PGA Tour now, you've really got to be playing some serious golf.
Yeah, listen, nice of you making. One of my buddies got his Champions Tour. He actually was a medalist in Q School. Rob Labritz, just one of the super great guys. He's a pro in our sector back home and had a nice year for himself.
I was reading about that not long ago. That he was a club pro and was medalist. That's very impressive. That's no joke.
But you know what? This guy had it. I was telling him, no one deserved it more. This guy wanted to play so bad. He's a great guy. He's at Glen Arbor Club in New York. Just a great guy, and a great player. Right, the Mets section is a tough section. For you to be good in that section, you're good. But
I hope he's playing clear golf ball.
he is not playing the clear golf.
Oh,
Listen, you never know. We're working out. I think he's happy with where he's at, and but I was just so thrilled for the guy to get his card and have a nice year out there.
As far as the model for retail, is it you're obviously at the price point it's at? You're the higher end clubs are the focus.
Yeah, so we're at a bunch of very high end clubs. Again, we're going to integrate with as Discovery gets on board. They're kind of following. My thought now, these guys have been so successful. They've kind of got a handle on. It's really just to follow the template of what they've set down on their other brands and kind of go with what they do. And I feel like my goal right now is just to keep providing them with like terrific products. Right? We got this. Again, our main owners, my partner is very big into pickleball, and we went ahead and got this ultra high tech thing, and something sold out in one day.
Well, PXG has done a hell of a job in reconditioning the consumer to spend arguably 2 to 3 times more, but they're going to get a higher quality product than they might have before. And I know that model intimately because my brother started with them 5 years ago, and I believe I don't know what his title is, but he's more or less a territory manager for the Southeast. I think his territory goes from Nashville to DC and down to Sea Island, Georgia, basically the entire Southeast outside of Florida. If someone would have told you 7 years ago that they could sell a set of golf clubs for $6,000 or $7,000, most people would say you're absolutely out of your mind.
Totally agree. Could not agree more. But you know what? Again, I don't know anything about their products. I know they look beautiful. In fact, Bob Parsons is very friendly with my partner Ed. I think they make sounds like they make a terrific product. I can't speak firsthand, but my guess is that was their mission also. We're going to build, something. I don't know if they have a technology or they have manufacturing specs, but they, clearly building a great product that they've done pretty well with.
And part of that model was that they've what was obviously the upper end market. The people that would appreciate the higher quality and had the means to purchase it. Because, and you go around because my brother used to go to Atlanta a lot. You got Peachtree National and Cherokee. I mean, you were talking about some very high end clubs.
Peachtree, one of my favorites.
Yeah, he tells me about it all the time. He said one of these times that he goes up there, I got to go with him. I said, look, I'm not going to abuse your position to try. He goes, no, the guys there are great.
If you're not going,
the girls are.
Just send me if you don't want to go.
Well, I didn't say I didn't want to go. I said I just didn't want to abuse an invitation, but I definitely am going to get there at some point.
It's a very nice hangout there.
If a club, and we have a number of clubs in the top 100 in our area, if one of the local clubs listens to this, or we're at a local tournament or a meeting or something like that, and they say, hey, Pete, how do we go about getting clear balls in our pro shop? Is there do they just contact you guys through the website?
I just brought a guy on named Gene Mulak. Gene was a lifelong pro. He opened this. He was a Dye Preserve. He was at Vineyard Club. He's most recently at Silver Spring in the Met section.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can probably best bet Gene, Gene at cleargolf.com.
I think Gene went to Ferris State, didn't he?
Went to Gene.
Yeah, Gene. I think he was a junior or senior when I was a freshman.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, let's see. I was there 90 to 94, and I think he was probably graduating about 91 or 92.
Wow. You should have Gene on here. He'd be more fun than me.
Well, we'd probably talk more about drinking beer and doing stupid shit and, at 3:00 in the morning than we would the technology of the golf ball.
Gene was a Ferris State guy. For sure he's going to be terrific for Clear. He's a well-respected, career PGA pro. Gene at Clear Golf, Gene at Clear Sports, and he'll get you set up for sure.
And so he's the director of sales or sales manager for y'all?
By the way, I probably should know his title. I don't yet, but he's he's kind of liaison for us. The Discovery properties, getting them on board and service. These guys, that service needs to be impeccable. It's they do everything right. I don't know if you've ever been to a Discovery property.
I've heard of them. I haven't been to any though.
It's something to see. I told Mike, no, when I go, Mike, you're used to this. To me, it's not real life. They just operate these things so perfectly.
It seems to be that the life cycle of products like yours, not saying golf balls, but just products in general across the spectrum of society that you start small and you're only in certain segments of the market and that the masses, so to speak, aren't aware of you. But as it progresses through the growth cycle of that product and becomes more known, demand seems to skyrocket once it's leaked out there, and the fact that you can only get it in certain places just adds fuel to that fire. Is that something that you guys as a company have considered how you might handle that? Good problem to have.
It's funny you say that. My original mind. Listen, I'm a country lawyer. I'm not a a retail guy. But my original model on this was a subscription model, and we did it. We would only allow 2 people per club on board. So if you were at a member of your club and you could invite one of your buddies, and you would get a package of balls for the year, a dozen balls, some nice swag. And I know that was Ed shut it down because he wanted to run it more like Patron, which was a good move. Clearly Ed's got a tremendous amount of expertise that I don't have, but I still think that was a good model only because every club we were at, we were turning guys away. The fear of missing out, hey, I want to get this thing. I love the ball. Can I get it?
Mm-hmm.
And we created it, and we never really developed it any more than that. It was, kind of a thing we were running, which I thought it was a good idea. But I think, here, we will be at the Discovery properties. How we roll it out after that, and, how we control distribution and access to it, I don't quite know yet.
It is one question that I got quite a bit on, and we've talked a lot about it being a premier product. Does the price reflect the steps and the costs that you have to take to maintain the quality control at the level that you want to?
So everything we do, again, and that's that becomes a big challenge, right? You're spending more on things, and we do these, whatever product you might talk about. When we spend more to produce something, it's getting reflected somewhere, and it prices some people out of the market.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of not ideal, but that's that's our market. Our market is the guy who wants the best and can afford it.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of that out there. I remember, again, to use my brother as the example, when PXG was getting going, and I'm thinking, how many people out there are going to buy golf clubs for thousands of dollars? And I'll be damned if the sales just didn't keep going up and up and up and up and up and up.
One of my buddies was a fitter for that, and he was telling me he just literally at one point couldn't keep up. I guess they were just, I don't know how it is now, but at the time they were just...
I'll tell you a real quick funny story. He came home one time when he was doing the fitting. This is, when he was in the entry level position. I believe it was it Cordell Stewart or somebody, he was fitting them, and Cordell pulls up in I don't know what it was, a Bentley or something like that. And he's got a $20,000 presidential Rolex on. So of course he starts to hit the TrackMan numbers are right there. He's hitting X amount better. He's picked up, 12 yards on his irons, and he's picked up 25 yards on his driver. And he says, finally gets to the end. He says, okay, how much is this going to cost me? And so my brother said, what do you want? And he said, oh, I want this, basically the whole package. He said, okay, here you go. Here's the number. And he goes, oh, come on. There's no way. My brother said, you pulled up in a car that costs $150,000. You're wearing a watch that costs $25,000, and you don't want to spend this to improve your game by 50%?
Yeah.
And he thought about it for a minute. He goes, you know what? You're right. You got me. And he said, yeah, here's the credit card. Go ahead and ring it up.
I tell my golf pros out all the time. The guys are worried about they're charging $150. I go, you're out of your mind. You can't get a lawyer in New York for $500 an hour. I go, it's harder to find a good golf pro than a good lawyer. If you fix a guy's golf game and charge him $1,000, he'd be thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you said. If it works, if it's something, improves what you're working. Listen, golfers are fanatical. They're dying to get better. If you give them something that's going to make them better, it's worth it.
Yeah, especially if they're going to spend $600 or whatever, $500 on a driver, and within 3 weeks, it's not going to do what they want to anymore. But if they're getting the results of a golf ball that was first of all that they wanted, and second of all was promised to them, and now all of a sudden it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, it's like, okay, yeah, this is legit. This is a company that says something and then they back it up.
No doubt. So I'm gonna shoot off here. I got to get out to meet a partner of mine for dinner. But I'm going to get you. I'll catch you offline. I got to get you shaft and some. Sound like you're low on balls, and I know Lie is tight with giving golf balls.
All right, Gary, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I'll get you all the links and everything. It's been great. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me on. Definitely a pleasure and a big honor.
Awesome.
Thanks, pal.